What's that, you ask? Another burn injury? Yes, I got burned this morning. And you may be wondering, girl, your hair's up here. How did you get burned down here? I don't know. Some of us were just born to be an example of what not to do, and I just happen to be that example. So the lesson of the day is don't put a curling iron between your knees and then turn your body. Also, honey is a great soothing treatment when you are burned, not oil. I learned that the hard way. Oil literally traps in the heat. Honey soothes it. Look it up. They used to use it in the old times, but not doctor's advice. Don't sue me. So I just wanted to get the fact that I have a huge bandage on my arm, because I'm sure some of you will be like, what is on her arm? And other people probably won't even notice. And some of you are probably just listening to me in the background and like doing some little chores, which I love that. I'll be your entertainment while you do things. But now we got that out of the way, let's go into today's video. Hey guys, welcome back. It's Missy, and if you're new here, welcome. I am a life and relationship coach, and on this channel we get to the root of the issue and we learn how to heal and deal. So if that's your thing, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I would love for you to be a part of the fam. And if you already are a subscriber, I really appreciate you so much. Speaking of healing, today we're going to talk about why you are not healing from your past, even though maybe you're doing all the right things and you're trying really hard, but for some reason you are just still not able to heal or work past it. And it's probably because you're putting oil on your burns. No, I'm just kidding. So if you clicked on this video, you probably most likely have already watched a ton of videos on self-healing with codependency, with trauma, with like maybe your own parents, with your own inner child wounds, or healing from a past narcissistic relationship. And so you probably have tried the things that you learned about, but you feel like maybe you haven't really gotten anywhere. Maybe it's helped a little bit, but it hasn't helped enough. And you're still stuck in this place and you probably feel helpless or hopeless, or like, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just always gonna be traumatized and maybe I'm always gonna be broken. But don't worry, I got you. We're gonna talk about some reasons why you still are stuck in the place that you're at and why you may not be healing. So the first thing is that you may not have gotten to the root of your actual issue. So you may have learned these things, took them on and tried to do them, but you didn't actually identify what the root cause or what the actual issue is. So then you're trying to do all these things to help these issues, but that may not be your core issue. It may be some of the issue, but it's not the core issue. So you don't entirely know what is wrong. And also another thing may be that you may lack self-awareness. So you may not be asking yourself a lot of questions to get to the root of what is actually going on. So because of that, you don't know what actually to work on. So that's why one of the first things you want to do is you want to get to the root. You want to ask yourself questions. Okay, what is going on? Why am I experiencing this thing? Where did it come from? Another huge one that keeps people stuck is fear. Our brains always look for familiarity. We look for comfort. So you may be addicted to negativity and you were afraid of feeling better. You don't know what that's like. You only know what it's like to be traumatized, to be in pain, and to be a victim of your circumstances. So healing and feeling better, that's the unknown. That actually makes you feel uncomfortable. Of course, all of us, we want to be happy and we want to heal, but it's so foreign to you that it may feel like it's unrealistic. So you may be afraid of it. Also, we as humans, we need motivation to heal. So you may not have the genuine motivation to heal. Your why is not strong enough. And this is partially because trauma makes it hard to trust not only ourselves but others. So when you are receiving this advice, you may not entirely trust it, trust the process, or trust yourself that you'll be able to get through it. And also when it comes to that trust, it's hard to see things positively. You're not used to positivity, so it's hard to work through those clouds and see the rainbow on the other side. So that can cause us to be scared and then become addicted to the negativity, which can cause us to self-sabotage and then sabotage our progress. So you want to identify that fear. What are you so afraid of? Admit it. I'm scared of getting better. I'm scared of what that looks like. I'm scared of failing. I'm scared that I'm never going to be able to actually heal. And admit that to yourself. Be real with yourself and then work through it. Because it's all about our beliefs. So when you recognize that fear, you can actually work through it. And then you can actually change that belief. Change that belief of feeling like it's never going to happen to that it can get better. Another thing, and this is a little bit harsh, but you may be lying to yourself about how much progress you've actually made. So going through self-healing, that is painful, that is tough. It takes a very strong person to be able to deal with the past pains and work through it. And so because of that, it can be very hard to take responsibility. So you may not be taking responsibility for your part. And so one of the reasons why we lie to ourselves is because that's our ego. Our ego thinks it knows better. Our ego is always there to protect ourselves from any perceived pain. So it may be hard to admit to yourself that you aren't actually as far as you thought you were, or you haven't actually put in as much work as you thought you have. So you'll tell yourself like, oh yeah, I've done a lot of work. Like for instance, if someone comes to me and they say, oh, I don't struggle with that anymore, but then their actions don't match their words, I know that I'm battling their ego and that they actually don't really feel very confident in themselves and they haven't entirely worked through this issue. Which that's another thing to point out, is like if your actions don't match your words, which is the key point that will show if you may be lying to yourself, then you know that you probably haven't really worked through those things. So for instance, let's say that codependency was an issue of yours and you say you're no longer codependent, but you're still seeking the validation of others. That doesn't really make sense. So most likely you aren't entirely telling the truth to yourself, and you're not being real of where you are, and you're not being real with how much progress you've actually made. So what you want to do is you want to be real with yourself. Okay, what have I actually done? Let's face the facts. What have I actually done, and what do my actions say? Am I still in a similar position? Have I improved somewhat? Because obviously you don't want to take away any of the progress and you don't want to invalidate yourself completely, but you want to be real. Be like, okay, this is where I know that I feel like I've gotten better. This is where I notice that I'm still struggling, and it's okay that I'm struggling. I just need to put a little bit more work, because like I said, it's hard to do that self-work. So your ego may be saying like, oh no, we did a ton of work, like we don't have to do any more work, like that's not my issue. And that shows insecurity more than confidence. Because when you're confident in something, you're willing to hear feedback. You're willing to still want to work on that thing if it does happen to be an issue. Which, talking about beliefs, that goes into the next point, which is you're not genuinely changing your beliefs. So for instance, if you're working on affirmations, you may be just saying them to say them, or you're working on your self-talk, you're working on self-love, and you're just saying it to say it rather than actually feeling it and then acting on these things. So when your beliefs don't change, your actions don't change either. And when your actions don't change, then your beliefs don't change. So you may be saying these things just to say it rather than actually feeling it. So it's easy to like look in the mirror and say like, I love myself, I deserve a healthy, happy life. Like it's easy to say those things, but it's completely different when you close your eyes or you visualize it or you look at yourself and you say it with conviction of like, I do love myself and I do deserve a happy, healthy life. There's a complete difference. You're saying it with feeling, you're saying it with meaning. And when you don't, you are then not changing your beliefs. And not only that, going back to what we had talked about before about your why not being strong enough, if you don't believe that you deserve a better life, or you don't believe that this stuff will work, or if you don't believe in yourself and believe in change, then nothing is going to happen. Your core beliefs that were ingrained in your brain from the trauma or the horrible things you've experienced are that you deserved it, you're worth this abuse, you're the cause of it. It's all those negative, disgusting things that you've heard over and over again. And that's why it's so hard to love yourself or give yourself the healing that you need, because your core beliefs are so horrid. So it can be hard to say it with conviction. It can be hard to change your thoughts because you have neural pathways that are strengthened to think more negatively. And it takes a lot of work to retrain your brain to be able to think more positively or to completely change your thought process. So what you want to do in order to change your beliefs is you have to have a strong why. So you have to realize that you're doing this because you love yourself and you believe in yourself and you believe there can be a change. And then you want to say these things with conviction. Every time you are saying something negative to yourself or you're feeling down, those are the moments when you need to catch it, and those are the moments when you need to change your thinking. Because it can be easy at the beginning of the day, if you're not really thinking positive, it can be easy to say these things. The most important time to do it is catching those moments when you're saying negative things and then reaffirming the opposite or the positive. The next thing is that you're not consistent with your healing. So our brains need repetition. you have these negative thoughts and these negative neural pathways from repetition, from the repetitive abuse, from the repetitive negative thoughts that you have in your mind. So the same thing, in order to counteract all of that trauma from the past, you have to be repetitive with yourself. You have to be consistent. Same thing, like let's say for instance you're going to the gym and you're trying to bulk up. You have to be consistent. You have to be repetitive. Otherwise the muscle, it loses its memory, and then you lose that muscle mass. The same way with our brains. Our brain is a muscle. You need that repetition. You have to be consistent. Because if you're not, if you do it a little bit and then you stop, it's not really going to help. So try to be as consistent as possible. Now, you don't have to be perfect. No one's perfect. No one remembers to do everything every day. Like when I give my clients homework, I'm like, try to do this every day. And if you can't, it's okay. And sometimes I'll be like, I did it like 4 times. I'm like, that's excellent. At least you did it 4 times. Try to be as consistent as possible. You don't have to be perfect. Because the whole point is you don't want to beat yourself up if you don't entirely do it so much, but it's just that you want to be forgiving towards yourself and just try to be as consistent as possible. The next thing is that you may not be enforcing boundaries. So it's easy when you learn about boundaries to set them. So you're like, yeah, I'm like, I want to say no to this. I don't want to do this. This is what I'm okay with doing. Like, it's easy to do that. It's much harder to enforce it, especially when you have very aggressive personality types. So when it comes to healing, it's really important to have boundaries, because from your past, you probably didn't have many boundaries. You probably were very codependent, you probably were very empathetic, you probably were overly giving, and because of this, you wound up in situations where you got taken advantage of or you wound up abused. So when it comes to healing, we need those boundaries. We need to learn how to love and take care of ourselves and not allow other people to mistreat us. Now, when you learn about boundaries, it's very easy to set them, but it's very hard to enforce them, especially when you're dealing with very aggressive, combative personality types. So I talk more about this in my How to Be Assertive video, which we did last week. And basically what you want to do in order to enforce your boundaries is you need to not back down. You need to make sure that you're very firm, and you need to make sure that you also are consistent. And if that person does not respect your boundaries, then there needs to be some sort of consequence. So maybe you need to leave, maybe you don't do that thing that they're asking of you, but there needs to be some sort of consequence when this person is not respecting your boundaries. And why it's super important to enforce your boundaries is because when you don't have boundaries for yourself, you still wind up in these situations where you're being mistreated, and then you think that you still deserve it. And it's a very hard environment to heal in if you're constantly being mistreated. Which goes into the next point, which is you still entertain unhealthy relationships. So this, like I said before, it keeps you in this negative place. Those people, they're reinforcing those negative things. They're reinforcing the belief that you deserve the mistreatment, or this is all you'll ever get, and this is all that you deserve. And this is a very subconscious thing. You're not like consciously thinking, but subconsciously you're thinking like, I'm worth crap. Like, I'm worth mistreatment. I don't deserve better. And so you also may be seeking emotional support from unhealthy people or people that are unavailable, or even let's say you're going to therapy, you may be still continuing a relationship with a therapist that may not be benefiting you and is actually not a right fit for you. And this is because you're conditioned to seek unhealthy people. Because our brain looks for that familiarity, your brain confuses mistreatment for love. And so because of that, you may not be getting the emotional support you may need. And also, we can't always just evaluate ourselves by ourselves. We need people we can trust that can give us insight into ourselves from an outside perspective. You need people that you feel like you can rely on and trust. And when you don't, you're not really able to fully grow and heal. So evaluate the relationships in your life. Are they more hurtful or are they more beneficial? And like I said, with your therapist, evaluate. Is this a relationship where you feel like it's beneficial, or do you feel like something's off? And then if you realize that you have unhealthy relationships in your life, you now need to seek out healthier relationships. So maybe you need to go to a new therapist. Maybe you need to go to a new life coach. Maybe you need to join a hobby or a group so that way you can meet new people and form a new emotional support circle. And I know that can be very hard, and when you're an adult, it's very hard to make friends, and it can be scary. Like, it's scary to get rid of people in your life, because then you may be like, oh shoot, like I'm alone now because all of the people in my life were unhealthy. But sometimes you need a fresh start in order to heal. You are the company you keep. So if you are around these unhealthy people, then you will continue to stay unhealthy. If you want to grow, then you need to be with people that have similar values, that want to heal and grow. So again, don't let fear stop you. Go and seek out that emotional support that you deserve. I almost just did the ending of my video in the middle of my video. Girl, you're not done yet. The next thing is that, this is especially for my codependents, but you still may be seeking the validation of outside sources rather than giving it to yourself. Now, this is a pattern that's very hard to break, especially if you're codependent. It's one of the sneakier ones, because here's the thing, like, it's pretty obvious when you're fixing or you're overly helping, but it can be kind of hard to realize when you are overly seeking the validation of other people. The biggest way to heal codependency is to stop seeking the validation of people so much and giving yourself that validation. And the way you can really point out if you're seeking the validation of people too much is recognize where your thoughts go immediately after you do something. Like, let's say you cook a meal. Does your first thought go to, what does everyone else think about it? Or let's say there's a situation that just happens and your first thought goes, I wonder what other people's opinions are. That's how you know that you're always still seeking for the validation of other people. Or notice when you get an urge to do something, are you doing it for yourself, or you're doing it because of maybe the way it would make you look, or maybe because it would make someone else happy, or maybe you'll get praise from someone else. That's how you can really see if you're still seeking for the validation of others. Because when you're still seeking the validation from others, it still keeps you in that codependent trap of feeling like you need other people and you need to rely on them to feel good about yourself. You're not forming genuine self-love. So what you need to do is, every time you do something, you need to do it for yourself. That's that strong why. And you need to make sure that you're giving yourself your own praise, your own validation. When you're having negative moments, and validate that it's okay that you have that emotion. When you do something that you're happy about, praise yourself. Tell yourself you did a good job. You completed a project, good job. You did this really cool makeup look, good job. Feel that praise yourself, rather than thinking, oh, I wonder what this person would say. Or maybe you notice you'll overly fantasize about people giving you praise. Turn that fantasy into you giving yourself that praise and feeling good on your own. It's okay to still feel good when other people give you validation and praise, because we are still humans. We still are social creatures where we need to be a part of society, but make sure it's not your primary focus or that you need it. It's rather like the cherry on top. And the next thing, you may not be working through your feelings, and you may not be allowing yourself to have your feelings. So the whole point of doing inner healing work is to be able to identify the uncomfortable negative feelings and the uncomfortable negative things that you've had to deal with, and then working through it. But again, that can be something that's very scary, so you may prevent yourself from feeling your feelings. You may start to get to a point where you recognize something that has happened. You may have recognized there was a traumatic experience that really affected you. You may recognize that there is a certain thing that's triggering you, and then you may not allow yourself to have those feelings. And it may be because you are dismissing your feelings, you may be belittling your feelings, and you may be looking for distractions. Because in the past, you weren't allowed to have feelings. And so you don't know how to be uncomfortable and be okay with being uncomfortable. So you use your old unhealthy coping mechanisms to deal with these uncomfortable feelings. So you may think like, oh, I did the work, like I recognize where the issue is, but you're not actually feeling it. You may immediately go from recognizing it to immediately going to being positive. Or you may recognize it and then immediately trying to distract yourself. And what happens with that is, like, when you immediately go to positive or you immediately distract yourself, you're not actually dealing with it. You're just using another tool to avoid it. You're skipping a whole entire step. So the whole point of feeling your feelings is that you're acknowledging them and you're able to be okay with being uncomfortable and being able to be compassionate with yourself. Because feelings are there to tell us something. They're there to help us work through something. So if you don't do that, you're not allowing yourself to tell yourself something, and you're not allowing yourself to work through it. And then you're not allowing yourself to actually genuinely heal. The whole point of healing is having those feelings. So it's really important that you take some time and sit with those uncomfortable feelings. Sit with that sadness. Sit with that anger. Sit with that anxiety, that frustration. Sit with it and allow yourself to feel it and be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And then after you do that for a period of time, you cry, you punch a pillow, you do whatever. When you do that for like 15 minutes, then you can work yourself through it of being very compassionate towards yourself. And you need to be able to do this without casting judgment on yourself and being very compassionate with yourself. And then you can work through it. That's when you can change your thinking. That's when you can go and give yourself your needs. But you first have to go through that step of feeling those feelings. Otherwise, they'll just be suppressed and they'll go down deep. And our brains don't like being uncomfortable, so your brain will just keep bringing it up over and over again until it's actually 100% dealt with. Think of dealing with your feelings like cooking chicken. Imagine you take the chicken out, you put it on the pan, and then immediately take it out. And then you start to eat it. What will happen? It will wind up making you sick. That's the same thing, like you're skipping an entire step. You're not letting the meat cook in order to actually enjoy it. You're not allowing yourself to deal with those feelings, so then you can actually give yourself what you need and what you want. That may or may not be a good analogy, but take it as you will. Give a girl points for trying. And the last thing, you may not have forgiven yourself or forgiven others, and it's keeping you stuck. So when you don't forgive yourself, or if you don't forgive someone else, resentment just sits inside of you. Resentment comes from lack of acknowledgement and lack of dealing with something. So when you have that resentment and you don't forgive someone, it just sits. The negativity sits. And I talk about this more in my Forgiving a Narcissist video, but studies have shown that it has physical effects. It hardens your heart. You have higher cholesterol. You're more prone to illness because more cortisol is running through your body, which is the stress hormone, and it's lowering your immune system. And this is because you're getting stuck on that negativity. The negativity is sitting inside of you. And it's keeping you stuck in that place. When you go back to a moment where you were hurt, your brain feels like you're there again because your brain doesn't know the difference between past, present, and future. So when you're remembering, you're there all over again, and then you're reliving that trauma over and over again. That's why talk therapy doesn't work for some people, because they're just talking about the same trauma over and over again, and there's no real resolution. It helps some people. I'm not shitting on it. I'm just saying some people it doesn't really help, especially people who have CPTSD. But talk therapy is really good to help you to understand things. But going back to forgiveness, when you remember this thing and you feel like you're there, you feel like you're experiencing it all over again. So that's why it's really important to be able to forgive. That's why it's really important to recognize when you're shaming yourself, and like if you haven't forgiven yourself for your past and the mistakes you made, it's really important to point that out. Or if you notice that you're still holding on to resentment from your abuser, the person that's hurt you the most, if you're still holding on to that resentment, you need to recognize that, and then you need to be able to choose to let it go. Resentment is then our own responsibility, because at that point we're choosing to sit in that anger. So you need to deal with it. You need to face whatever it is head on. Or otherwise, if you don't, like I said, you'll stay stuck in that place. You won't actually be able to heal. But if you're more interested in a more in-depth of forgiveness, definitely check out my How to Forgive a Narcissist video. So the whole point of healing is to make sure that you are not harsh with yourself. Listen, it's okay if you mess up. You just want to try again. You want to be the most compassionate. You want to give yourself the most love, and you want to give yourself all the things that you didn't have as a child. And it's about a journey. It's not 100% about a destination. There's always going to be up and down. Expect it. But just please don't judge yourself, and please be compassionate and loving towards yourself. So what do you guys think? Leave it all in the comments below, and please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with someone that you think may need it. Until next time, thanks for watching. Bye guys. Don't be mean to yourself. I mean it. Because our brain looks for that familiarity. Girl, I have such a hard time with words. I haven't heard one peep from my dog. She's probably getting into some trouble.